Hello, everyone. I'm Wendy Myers of MyersDetox.com. Thank you so much for joining the Myers Detox podcast, where we talk about everything related to heavy metal and chemical detoxification. And today we're going to be talking about your genetics. We have my friend Joe Cohen of Selfhacked.com and selfdecode.com on the show to talk to you about finding your genetics for weight gain, for thyroid, for diabetes, and other health conditions so that you can make more individualized choices for your diet and your health and your lifestyle, and why this is so important as well. And we're going to be talking about certain topics related to, why almost all doctors don't use genes to make recommendations for you. It's just mind-boggling. We'll also talk about, how would knowing your genes help with finding, specific diet, lifestyle, supplement approaches to counteract or to navigate around your individual genetic variations. And we'll also talk about, how to discover the genes that make you susceptible to weight gain or diabetes. And we'll also talk about, how many genetic companies today are selling your information, your genes, to pharmaceutical companies, and how to find a company that won't sell your information. I know a lot of people that want to do their genes, but they're really worried about their privacy, their medical information being shared or used against them. And we'll talk about how you can get your genes done and not have to worry about that. So I know you guys listening are concerned about the level of toxins you have in your body. That's why you're listening to this show. And I created a 2-minute quiz that you can take after answering some lifestyle questions. Will give you a result that will tell you about your relative level of toxins in your body burden of toxins. You can take that quiz at heavymetalsquiz.com. Only takes a couple of minutes. And after you get your result, you get a free video series that I created specifically to answer your most frequently asked questions related to detox. So how long does it take? What kind of testing should I do? Where do I get started? I answer so many questions on this totally free video series. So go check it out at heavymetalsquiz.com. Our guest today, Joe Cohen, is a well-known biohacker and founder of Selfhacked.com. I love his website, so thoroughly researched, and he has tons of evidence-based health and performance information that reaches 2 million visitors each month. He has quite a fascinating background, and he likes to say that he won the genetic lottery of bad genes. And as a kid, he suffered from inflammation, brain fog, fatigue, digestive problems, anxiety, depression, and other issues that were poorly understood in both the conventional and alternative medicine fields, which embarked him on a journey of self-experimentation in starting Selfhacked.com. He's also the founder of selfdecode.com, which lets people get personalized health recommendations based on their genes. Joe, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, Wendy.
Yeah, so I follow your work. I love your work. I love your website, Selfhacked. So I'm thrilled to have you come on the show. And I wanted to talk to you first, just why don't you tell us about your story, like how you got into health. We're going to talk about, genes and detoxification and thyroid and weight and how genes affect a lot of your health outcomes. But first, tell us how you got into this.
So growing up, I had like a lot of health issues, and over time they were getting worse, not better, which is not surprising. If you do the same thing, the issues are going to get worse. And so I was always kind of into health, even as an adolescent, because I always had health issues, and I was always trying to optimize my health. And I was trying different things. And once it started getting worse in my mid-20s, that's when I decided I needed to focus on it full time in order to really understand what's going on. And I just felt like, everyone had a unique biology. Everyone had their unique, we're all unique in our own ways. I felt like I was reading some general health information And I also went to doctors, conventional doctors, and they weren't really focused on optimal health or things that were not conventional disease, let's say cancer or heart disease or something like that. And so I didn't have any of those. It was kind of more like, general inflammation, no kind of autoimmune disease that they can diagnose. And I just felt like, okay, the conventional doctors are not my route. And I went to some alternatives, but I just felt like it wasn't being individualized. It was like a template. And, sometimes the template could be good and so what happens is people with specific issues, they follow someone with similar issues and they get a template that worked for that individual, and it can work for them as well. I didn't really fit into any template. I was kind of just like, had my own issues. Some people had some of the issues, other people, I mean, but I just felt like I needed to get to the root of the issues, like really understand my body, really understand natural supplements and or natural health strategies and how they interact with my body. So that's kind of how I started Selfhack basically, as a personal research blog. And then I evolved it into basically a health encyclopedia that was very in-depth, very thorough. And then I realized that I needed to get into personalization tools that would help me and other people really dig down into, the root cause, genetic causes, and also lab tests that were, worsening their health issues.
Yeah, I love your site so much. It's so thorough. It's so well researched. You always have so many references to support everything that you're talking about. You have very thorough articles on Selfhack. It's just really, I highly, highly recommend it. And but also, I love that you're getting into this individualized concept of healthcare, because I find it very scary when you go to a conventional medical doctor. They're not looking at your genetics at all. And they're making all kinds of recommendations for medications, or a functional doctor will recommend supplements based on your genetics. Vitamin C can be amazing for one person and even lethal for another person. And so I just think that I would never go to any kind of functional practitioner or medical doctor unless they were looking at your genetics.
Right. So genetics is obviously huge, right? I had a lot of autoimmune issues, gut issues, mood issues, and a lot of them, I mean, they were obviously, my mom had them, my grandmother had them. Obviously, there's a genetic cause. And obviously, I got rid of all my issues. So what we know is that genetics were very influential for me because we see that I had this background. And we also know that there's ways to counteract negative genetics. And the critical thing is to really understand what are the most important genes that are contributing to an issue that you're dealing with. So whatever it is, whether it's weight, if we look at weight, for example, at the end of the day, someone who, we know that a lot of it's environmental, right? Because the obesity rate and the weight problems are going up over time, right? We also know that it's highly genetic as well. You'll see parents who are overweight and their kids will be much more likely to be overweight as well. And so weight is actually one of these interesting areas where the science has said that the genetics of weight is, obesity, excess weight is basically somewhere between 20 to 80 some odd percent, which is a lot. So for some people, it could be a lot more, where it's like very heavily genetic, and they're trying everything, and both of their parents are overweight, and it could be very, very heavily genetic. And then obviously there's also environmental factors, right? We know that as you get older, you're more likely to gain weight, or menopause, lower estrogen, things. There's a lot of areas where essentially like, there's a lot of things that change in the body, hormones. So we know that weight can be influenced, and we also know that it's heavily genetic. Whether, there's also some people that no matter what they do, or this is from their perspective, they can't gain weight. And then there's, a lot of people who say no matter what they do, they can't lose weight. So you see these two sides of the spectrum, and you're like, obviously there's, these people can be eating the same exact diet and they still have very, very different weight profiles. One person could be, very like gaunt, and another person could be, completely obese, and they could be eating the same thing. And, everyone's really trying to lose weight. It's something that's very common in society, especially, as you get older. So we know that weight is an example of something that is genetic. Same with like longevity. If you have parents that live long, then you're more likely to live long. But we also know that if you, do the right things for your body, that you're also more likely to live long, right? So it goes like that with basically everything, right? So I have these genetics for bad gut genes and autoimmune genes, but I've been able to overcome them, right? And a lot of people with my issues have not been able to overcome them, even with the same issues. And the reason is because you really have to dig down into the genetic basis of why someone is, whether overweight or even underweight. This is going to be a genetic basis. And you also have to look at your lab tests as well, because there's going to be things like hormones, and sometimes your genetics can't really tell that stuff, right? The lab tests are basically telling you what is happening right now in your body. And even though your genetics can predispose you to certain levels of hormones, right? Of course. But at the end of the day, looking at your actual hormones is going to be the best way to tell if you're, if something's out of whack, and you could see if that's related to weight. So lab tests are really important, and your genetics is really important. I think it's really important for everything, right? For pretty much, because it really is something that is very deeply embedded into our health in terms of genetics and lab tests. And the key is really to understand what are the core things that are causing some kind of issue, whether it's gaining weight or whether it's, whatever it is. What is the core things that are causing the issue, and then how you can counteract it. I could give one example that I think your audience would be interested in terms of, genetics. So I actually don't have a big problem with heavy metals, but I didn't know that until basically like I was eating a lot of fish, right? I was really pounding fish. I was eating like 2 pounds of fish a day. And we know that fish has a lot of heavy metals. And I said, okay, fish has a lot of heavy metals, and I started to get brain fog and other issues. And I realized it was from fish. So, okay, I'm eating too much fish. But I also want to know, what is the root cause of this brain fog that I'm getting from fish? I was pretty sure that it was from heavy metals, right? Mercury especially, but it has other heavy metals as well. So basically I took a whole bunch of things that caused me to that caused mercury detox and other, basically I was taking it with NAC, glutathione, lipoic acid, and some some chelators that are specific to mercury as well. And I didn't notice anything like not good or bad. Some people who are sensitive to heavy metals, they can notice like bad effects because it's chelating it and it's moving around the body. And then some people can notice good effects in the sense that they're chelating these heavy metals, and it's not, it's not harming them as a result. So for me, it was the most natural thing to try that out, but it didn't help me at all. Didn't notice any difference in terms of the brain fog I was getting after eating fish. And this is, it helped me realize also, so I, obviously I was eating fish for a while, and, when you eat fish once, it's like, yeah, you know what, I have some brain fog, but I didn't really notice it acutely. Only when I ate fish like every day for 2 weeks, I'm like, holy shit, I'm losing my memory here. It's like my brain is like collapsing here. I'm losing my memory. I'm forgetting things. It's really weird. And this was actually independent of the other health issues that I solved previously. This This happened like, a year or two ago, where it's like I'm completely healthy and it's like, whoa, what is happening with my brain fog? So obviously I have this genetic company and lab tests, and, self-decode and lab test analyzer. The first thing I wanted to check were some genes related to detoxing. And I noticed I had two genes, that were not working well. One was the NRF2 and one was the PON1. And it turns out that the PON1 is what detoxes plastics. And we also know that the oceans are basically, they are contaminated with plastics to the wazoo. And, it's just, our ocean is like filled with plastic, and it becomes microplastics and the fish eat them. Even if you're eating like clean fish, you still are getting these plastics, right? Wild Alaskan salmon, you are getting these dioxins. They break down into the, after fish eat them, they break down into dioxins and other kind of toxins that are found in plastics. Phthalates, dioxins, BPA. These are the main kinds of toxins. I said, okay, so I'm getting brain fog from fish, and I know I have this gene that's not detoxing well, this PON1. And so I look at some of the recommendations, and I basically start to think, what can detox plastics or toxins? And it turns out that activated charcoal works very well for it. Now, I've taken activated charcoal before, but I didn't notice any beneficial effect when I took it in my experiments. So you kind of drop it off, right? But when I took activated charcoal, when I was in that brain fog state, it completely took away the brain fog. It was very acute. And ever since then, I always take activated charcoal after eating fish, and I don't get brain fog from eating fish. It's just something I do right now. And I know that whenever and after then, I completely stayed away from plastics in terms of water bottles and things like that. And yeah, just because even though I didn't really I'll drink a water bottle and I won't notice any negative effects from it right away. But I know now that I'm sensitive to these plastic toxins, and the way to counteract that is actually with activated charcoal. So I didn't stop eating fish. But I did take the activated charcoal, and it basically counteracted the negative effects from my PON1 gene and the NRF2 as well. So the NRF2 also detoxes the plastics, and so does the PON1. And the activated charcoal basically completely counteracted that. So that's like an example of how knowing your genes can really help you. Even though I was I was at the peak of my health, I had no issues, but then all of a sudden something comes along and it's like, what is going on with this brain fog? This is not like the other kinds of brain fog I had in the past that were related to other things. It wasn't related to necessarily inflammation per se. It was some toxin that I was ingesting. And so that was very important for me. So I'm always looking at my genes. Genes are really, and also my lab tests, they're really something that doesn't get old. It's really you really want to understand the blueprint of your body and understand what are the most important genes that are giving you an issue. So if your main issue is weight, then you want to know what are the most important weight genes that are causing you to gain weight, and each of those genes has their own unique recommendations. And what we do is we put them in a report that prioritizes these recommendations based on our algorithm, and you're able to look at those prioritized recommendations in our reports, and you're also able to look at the personalized blog posts that dive deeper into each gene, and you're able to learn what are the genes that are increasing your risk. So the best way to do it is, genetics is not at a point where we can predict extremely accurately, how much you're going to weigh. And the reason is because we don't know your lifestyle, and, you could be counteracting the negative effects of those genes. it's not the best thing to know, to really predict exactly what is going to, what is going on. But if someone is overweight and they want to lose weight, then we know that the person has an issue, and we know that genetics is contributing to it, especially if they're trying standard ways to lose weight, let's say. And obviously they need to do something different. There has to be a unique approach if somebody is trying to lose weight, or if they're trying to detox and they don't, they're not successful, right? If they see, and so, like, let's say you can keep taking mercury chelators, but if your NRF2 gene is not good, then, the detox is not going to be as good. And we're living in a world where there's more toxins in the system, more than maybe we even evolved to handle. Especially there's always a spectrum of the population, right? And so you look at SNPs, let's say, these single variants in your genome. These are the most popular types of genetic variants. And, they're always within a bell curve in the population. Each, some of them could be more common or less common. Some of them could only be 1% of the population, while others, others could be 80% of the population that have it, or something like that. But, there's a spectrum in the population, and each person is somewhere along that spectrum. When you combine all your genetics together, you are somewhere along that spectrum for your tendency to gain weight, or your tendency to lose weight, or your tendency to detox well. And so you have people who just naturally handle toxins well, because, it's just a variation in the population. Every trait basically has some, bell curve where you're on somewhere where your genetics are giving you they're either less advantageous compared to the, rest of the population, or they're more. And then it also obviously is interacting with your environment as well. So if your genetics, and it could be different toxins as well, right? So you might be particularly, I'm not susceptible to mercury that much, right? Not that I can tell, but I'm more susceptible to plastics. And so, I could be less susceptible to mercury in comparison to the population, let's say, and I could be more susceptible to plastics. And so if you're exposed to a large amount of these toxins, it's really going to, show in some way. You might get some symptoms, and it could be any kind of symptoms. It doesn't have to be brain fog. It could be something else. It could be lower energy. It could be weight gain, right? It's really, and so you really need to look at your genes and try to figure out which ones are the ones that are contributing to, an individual's issues.
Yes, absolutely. And I like that you said that, some people are going to be, have better ability to detox than others, because we all, have heard of people that drink and smoke until they're 100 years old. And that's probably not you, but it's a good idea to find out your blueprint. And it's amazing. So many people have not had their genetics done. And I strongly urge people to do this, because when I did my genetics, I did 23andMe, a long time ago. But you can now plug it into various, apps and get information. But I found out I had definitely genes for diabetes. So I know I really have to watch my sugar and carbohydrate intake. And I have my thyroid's a mess, my liver's a mess. And so I'm much more careful about taking care of my liver, doing coffee enemas, liver support supplements, and things like that, because I know my body's weaknesses and my blueprint, and it helps drive my behavior and my decisions when it comes to my health. And I love that you have your own platform for helping people with their genetics. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So in this platform, you can either buy a kit or upload an existing kit that you've already bought from, let's say, 23andMe or Ancestry or any other company, really. You upload it, and you basically get access to a whole suite of tools that are, reports that are deep dives in given topics. Some of the ones that I think your audience would be interested in are thyroid, weight. We don't have a report on detox, but we have some articles on that, personalized articles. And you can see, and then we also have, and so the reports are good for prioritizing recommendations and giving you some overviews. And then the individual blog posts are really good because they're personalized. So the content changes based on your genetics. And it's really good to identify which genes are problematic. And then you can look at all the recommendations that are related to it. So, let's say if you're prone to diabetes, it actually gets more granular than that, than just staying away from sugar, right? So you might do better, relatively better with fiber than other people, right? You might do better with this kind of diet or that kind of diet. And it gives you kind of these ideas where you're like, hey, you know what? This healthy lifestyle that, that is counteracting these genes, I haven't tried that before, right? And, it could be a good thing for me to try out, especially because it's, increasing, because these genes are increasing my risk, and these recommendations are counteracting those genes.
And so someone does this test, can they do the genetic test with you directly, or do they need to do 23andMe or Ancestry.com and then run it through your application?
They can do it with us directly, and we provide it as a service just to make it more seamless for the customer so that they don't have to use two different services. Our chip is also better than 23andMe's in terms of the SNP coverage, the number of SNPs. We also don't sell people's data, which is basically the business model of 23andMe. So a lot of people are concerned about that. And so for those reasons, we offer our own chip, not really to make money from it, because selling genetic kits is not a money-making business. But what we do is we charge the same amount as 23andMe. And basically, we're not making a profit off of it, really. It's really just as a service to people. And so they could either have their own kits, or they can do their own thing, which is fine with us, or they can do it with us, and they can get, the benefits that I mentioned. And in addition, that you can also upload your labs to that same platform. So what we're doing is we're making it a very comprehensive platform. Basically, it includes the, really deep dive. You can really go through your genetics in a bunch of different ways. It also allows you to go through your lab tests. So before we had separate companies, Self-Decode for the genetics, lab test analyzer for the genetic lab test, and then Selfhack for the content. And what we realize is people want all of them together, right? They want one platform that could really give them everything in one. And so we combine the lab test analyzer with Self-Decode so that you can get both of those. And then we also combine Selfhack now. What we've done is we decided we have to create our own ecosystem. And so we brought in Selfhack there. So you get this database of content that is exclusive to our members, and with the lab analyzer, with the genetics. And we're building out a whole suite of tools that allows you to, really, like improve your health on an individualized basis. And whether that's, alternative medicine, medical doctors, functional doctors, they love Selfhack. So whether it's, they love Self-Decode and lab analyzer. So whether it's with the help of, a professional or not, either way, you could really, when you're using these tools, you could really get help by it.
Fantastic. And I like that you brought up that, 23andMe is selling the information. They're actually selling the data to pharmaceutical companies. And a lot of people are really off-put by that. And I have had a number of people I know that don't want to get their genetics done because they're scared of it, their information being used in some way or used against them in the future or what have you. What do you say to that versus your platform?
Oh, I'm in agreement. I mean, so as far as we're concerned, number one is, we care about, we're not interested in partnering with pharmaceuticals, number one, right? That's just not what we're about. Number two is, even from a business sense, it wouldn't make sense. You have to have millions of people's genetics in order to even think about that, right? And somebody, 23andMe has like 15 million genetic files from people. And so they have a business case for it, and they were created to do that. We were created to be different than 23andMe and not go down that route, right? That's why we just have a very, very different product. We focus on the recommendations. We focus, natural recommendations, not pharmaceutical recommendations. We focus on, optimizing health, getting to the root cause of the problems, looking at which genes are problematic. Whereas 23andMe, really their whole business model is how can we get more pharmaceuticals out there? How can we sell more people's data? And so they subsidize people's data often in order to get more data to sell to the pharmaceuticals. And it's really not what we're about. And it just does not fit into our business model at all. We have more of a community of subscribers who, they like our whole ecosystem, and, they get their lab tests done. They could check it, their genetics, and the information is always evolving. We're always, releasing new reports and new personalized blog posts and new posts as well. So it's a very different model than 23andMe. And also we got out of the Google model because, we don't want to just be a shill for Google and be like, well, is Google going to approve of this or not? Right. It's very easy to go down that route, but we don't want to do that because that's just not what we're about. And so we have to, have our own ecosystem where, the customer is our subscriber and we do everything for the customer. We give them, our goal is to give them the best recommendations in order to improve their health, not to be affiliated with a pharmaceutical company.
Yeah, and if any of you guys want to try and get your genetics done, which I highly, highly recommend, go to get.selfdecode.com/Wendy. And you guys can go there and get a discount, a special discount just for my listeners. And also you can use coupon code Myers Detox as well on that page. So tell us, we get certain types of recommendations or reports for supplements based on our genes, diet based on our genes. What can people expect?
So it basically, when you download a report, it prioritizes the recommendations based on your genetics that you should be implementing first, right? And, and I think it's good, like, again, let's say if you're trying to lose weight, you want to go with the top 5 recommendations and then start implementing those and see how they are impacting you. And then you can keep going down on that list and see what it is that also fits in with your body. Maybe, we can't look at everything possible in every issue. It's really focused on a single issue, and the individual would, either them and their practitioner are going to say, maybe I'll skip recommendation 3 because of some other thing that whatever. But essentially, you want to look at the top recommendations and you want to implement them. And you also want to look at the personalized blog. We break it down by topics, and you want to look at which are the genes that are increasing your risk the most. Yeah, I mean, I can share my screen. If do your listeners see the video? So if they're seeing the video, you could see that this breaks down. I click on a category like weight, and there's detox, there's thyroid, and it breaks down the genes that are, increasing my risk of weight gain. There's a leptin gene here that is increasing my risk. There's some cytokines. These are like, uncoupling proteins that are related to, fat burning. This one is, related to the circadian rhythm, the clock gene. And so UCP1 is related to, weight gain. And there's, for each of these genes, so we have about 55 genes in this weight category. And it basically shows you what are the top genes that are increasing the risk. And then you can click on it and then see, the recommendations. Basically, you can read about the gene, look at the SNPs involved, let's say, and you look at your score. Every gene has a scorecard telling you, if it's increasing your risk. And then it gives you a personalized genetic summary and some personalized recommendations based on that gene, right? So in this case, FAIM2, turns out that having too much saturated fat can increase weight gain as a result of this gene. Now, this is an individual gene, but if the report is good because it takes into account all your genes related to weight.
That's fantastic. I mean, that's very, very clear. Because I've definitely gotten my 23andMe genes and run them through different apps, and that's just very, very well laid out, very, very clear, very easy to understand. So I really, really like it just for that reason. So I think that's just, like I mentioned, it's amazing to know what you're working with, because a lot of people are doing guesswork. A lot of people are following certain people and then doing the diet that works for that person, which is not necessarily going to work for you. A lot of people fall into these traps where they know they need to detox, but they're not, kind of doing a specialized detox that's, individualized for them. And people kind of struggle and they flounder around and they try different things. And all the while, they'd be having much more bang for their buck and their time if they kind of knew what they were working with for themselves individually. And it's just amazing to me, like I said, that so many doctors and practitioners not looking at genetics and they're just flying blind, basically. There isn't any excuse in today's day and age to be doing that when you're working with patients.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, as time goes on, we get more and more knowledge of the genes and what we can do about them. And it really isn't an excuse. Like if a doctor is not, if a doctor is not using your genetics, they're really, like you say, they're flying blind. It's like trying to do rehabilitation for a building and you don't know the blueprint of that building. Let's say if you're in a building, there might be a specific room that you want to fix up because it's having problems like a leak. And you want to look at the blueprint of the building and see where are the pipes located, what is causing the issues in this particular room or this particular problem. And you also want to make sure that you're looking at the labs as well. So, just looking at labs, you can't really do that without software to see which are the labs that, are out of the optimal range and what there is to do about each lab. It would take too much time. And so, if a doctor is not using these kinds of tools, then it's just, they're not really taking into account these variables that could be very important.
Yeah, for me, if I want to work with a medical doctor, I've only seen one doctor in my entire life that used software to make recommendations. And it's really sad when there's so many tools available. I mean, I only met one doctor that was looking at medication interactions. I think a lot of doctors make recommendations and are just not double checking things. It just blows my mind. So for me, that if I'm working, I don't go to doctors, but when I have in the past, that for me was really important, that I wanted them to be using software if they're making any recommendation for me. So I recommend running for the hills if your doctor's not using software. Yeah.
And doctors are able to use our software. We have plans for them. They can, there's no excuse not to use it. Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, if I agree, if I wouldn't go to a doctor personally that wasn't using software to look at labs or genetics or these kinds of things, you're really flying blind.
Yeah, and also when you're looking at different labs, the lab ranges are all the sick people coming in, and these lab ranges are created as an average of all the ill people coming in doing their lab work. That's not the ranges you're wanting to look at or aiming to be in that range.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah. So, I think we all had a situation where you go to a doctor and they'll just say, yeah, all your labs are fine. And what they're really saying is that we can't diagnose you with an official disease right now, right? Sometimes you might have a condition and they still don't diagnose you. And other times, because, they really want to see it clear in your lab results. Other times you might not have a condition like I didn't, but my thyroid hormones were low. And I wouldn't have known that without using software that has a whole research team behind it, researching what are the optimal levels, what could be lowering it, what could I do to increase it, and showing me. And so my and as doctors will often only test TSH, right? So it's very kind of rigid system, which is why alternative doctors are better in a lot of ways, because like they already understand that you got to also check for the T3 total and free T3. And my levels were very low, and they doctors weren't saying, they were saying everything's fine, you don't have any issues. But I know I didn't feel good. So and then now I do feel good. So obviously I did have an issue, and they just my T3 was not in the optimal range. And so the lab analyzer would pick that up, but doctors would not. And same thing with, a lot of people, you might have hormones out of range, and doctors will not mention anything unless it's like really, really out of range.
I mean, it's so important, I think, to self-hack and take your responsibility for your healthcare into your own hands and research what all this means and your labs mean, because doctors are typically going to spend 5 minutes with you and not explain stuff. And if there's not a medication for it, they may not bring it up when there's a lot of lifestyle and diet things and detox that you can do to get that lab in an optimal range. So, and that's what's great about your platform is you give a lot of different recommendations, diet, lifestyle, etc., based on your lab work, so that you don't have to do that guesswork.
So I think you brought on a really important point, that the main thing we're trying to do really is empower people to take charge of their health. Now, whether you want to use a doctor to help you out or not, that's a personal choice. But, the individual should be empowered. And that's kind of why I went down this whole route, because I was not empowered. I didn't have the right content. I didn't have the right tools to analyze my genetics or lab tests. And, I literally had to make it my full-time job. And I'm a pretty smart guy. I was reading thousands and thousands of studies, right? Why should I have to read thousands and thousands of studies in order to improve my health? There's obviously something wrong here, right? And, we're living in a time where we decoded the genome in 2003. And since then, there's just been an avalanche of studies, and there's a whole bunch of things progressed since then, right? We have so much science. If you look at the science, you'll see so much science is just from the past 15 years, right? They really did genetic research starting from 15 years ago. And so it keeps on coming out. But why are we not using it? The world literally spent many, hundreds of billions of dollars figuring out what all these things mean, and nobody uses it for healthcare. I mean, the conventional doesn't, and even the big genes like ApoE4, BRCA, it's just not part of the medical system, right? And so we actually have reports on those those genes like ApoE4, ApoE, BRCA, MTHFR, TP53. These are quite important genes, and also COMT as well. And other genes, as well. But essentially, they're really not taking into account genes when they're giving you any health advice. And, they're starting to do that in the alternative world, but I don't think they're adopting it quick enough, just because, there is some complexities involved. It does require you to read some things. It's there. It's not super hard. We're making it 100 times easier so that you don't have to look up thousands of studies in genetics and look up each individual gene or whatever. We're really, with the software, we're already putting all the content there, and we're organizing it for you so that you could instantly pick out the top 10 genes that are increasing your weight or worsening your thyroid health. And you have all the information there. You got all the recommendations there. You have the reports that you can download that give you prioritized recommendations. And then you have the lab tests that you could take that will also give you insight, and you can read on Selfhacked, which is a resource that only existed in the past few years. And with the extent that it has, we have huge database of 1,500 really comprehensive posts on a variety of topics. And so all this research really wasn't around 20 years ago. If you go to PubMed and look up curcumin or something, you wouldn't really see anything. It would just be very, very sparse. It was not a lot of information. But we're now having a lot of information, and it's really important that it's put together in in a much more simple way, so you don't have to read like 10,000 studies like I did, right? Or make it your full-time job just to be healthy. That that would have been something you needed to do in 2010, to be honest, which is when I had these issues and I was doing that. But I just knew it was like, other people cannot do this, right? They have families, they have kids, they got full-time jobs. I literally had to drop out of school, quit my job, just like couldn't work, and just focused 100% of my time on reading about genetics and lab tests and all these things. But if it were now, it would be way, way easier. I just upload my labs, see what are the top lab tests that are, not optimal. What are the top genes for for a given issue that's not optimal? And then it just makes it so I could spend a couple hours really figuring these things out. And then, over time, you could read an article here or there and really get to the root cause of your issue.
Yeah, I mean, that's really where the future of medicine is going, this individualized medicine based on genetics. And, so it's here right now. You can do it right now. And the sad thing is that in medicine, the research has shown that conventional medical doctors are 15 to 17 years behind the research. And that's why they're not using genetics and other things in their recommendations, which can be deadly.
100%.
I mean, I know so many people that have almost died from their medications or for a surgery they didn't need to have that could have been addressed naturally. I mean, the number 3 way that people die is medical mistakes. So you really have to be careful, for me, my personality is like, I second guess, why do I need that medication? Is there a natural alternative? Is there something else that I can do? Is there a natural lifestyle change or a diet change that I could be making to improve my condition? You're not going to get that from your doctor. So for me, you don't ever want to leave your health decisions in the hands of one person who is naturally, as a human being, going to have a limited knowledge set or limited toolkit. And so you want to be, looking at a number of, consulting with a number of people and questioning everything.
Yeah, that's a really good point, what you said about doctors being 17 years behind. Like, if you really think about it, it makes sense. No doctors are using genetics right now. In the conventional, they're starting to in the alternative, but in the conventional sphere, there's no doctors using genetics. And that would have been fine 17 years ago. Right. And it takes a really long time, in part for a few reasons. One is just because the system that we have, requires a very high threshold of evidence in order to recommend something, basically that, no natural product can do, only the pharmaceutical companies. Right. So, there's like, oh, we got this slight benefit here for this condition, and we spent $1 billion to figure that out. You're not going to have that with like natural stuff. Right. Is not going to be like, $1 billion spent to see whether exercise helps with a specific condition or not, and so, and even with diet as well. And that's why you have all these, like, this whole mess of dietary advice where it's like everybody has their different opinion because they've never spent billions of dollars of research on each aspect. How does diet help this condition? How does it help this condition? We just have like these epidemiological studies, which is not, it's useful, but it doesn't give you very clear answers. And then also all these studies weren't taking into account genetics. And so you have just different people reacting to different things, and it's just a mess. Like, some people can lose weight on saturated fat and some people gain weight. And it's like, oh, well, is saturated fat bad for you or not? Well, it depends on the individual, right? Or how bad what level of saturated fat do you need, and things like that. And so, number one is it really takes a long time to get into medical school because it needs this kind of research for each individual thing. Like, a drug is approved for one particular condition, not for like 100, right? So, in order to approve a diet for something, you would need to like spend $1 billion for each condition. It's just, but over time, it's like they're like, oh, okay, we have enough epidemiological studies to know that if you eat healthy, in some kind of general sense, if you're just like do some general healthy things, if you stop smoking, you'll be healthier. So that's what we're going to recommend. Just don't smoke, exercise and eat healthy. What healthy means? It's it's anyone's guess exactly, but just eat healthy, right? and so by the time it gets into medical school is one thing, and then doctors who learn it, it's just it's really not going to get into the medical establishment for, I think it's even longer than 17 years. What we have a lot of really, really tens of thousands of studies on genetics done, and we have tons of information in the science. It's just none of it is in the, is being taught in medical schools, or doctors don't know about it. Alternative is more likely to adopt these things quicker because they don't have to have $1 billion. They don't have to see $1 billion spent on something to know that it works. They'll maybe like get feedback from their patients. They'll see something works with their patients or whatever. And they're also starting to use genetics and lab tests to start seeing more in depth. But I think it's it's definitely the future. And when it comes to content, the content that we produce now is all personalized because if you're reading something, like we already have the personalized blog set up so that all the content that we produce could be very highly individualized to you as an individual, rather than giving you some generic content and saying, oh, this has been found to work in one small study or something like that. It's like, hey, check this out based on your individual genes.
And so what are some changes that you made? So you did your genetics, and what kind of lifestyle changes or diet and exercise, et cetera, did you make once you discovered your genetics?
So it's been a long journey. Like for me, it wasn't like I got my genetics partly because I was developing the software over time, and I was, when I started doing it, it was just like reading research papers and comparing it, doing like a control F on my SNP file and seeing, do I have this variation or whatever, right? So it's kind of like, well, the way I was doing it is kind of like, reading bits of computer code and trying to figure out what the software is saying, right? But whereas now what we have is like, an operating system like Mac or Windows that allows you to navigate your body and what you should do much more conveniently than ones and zeros, which is really what computer code is. It's just ones and zeros, but they're working based off of like, existing architecture and infrastructure, but it all comes down to ones and zeros. And so, so over time I gain a lot more information, and it's kind of like I'll get a good tip here, I'll get a good tip there. I realized that a lot of my food sensitivities were as a result, and gut inflammation was a result of my cannabinoid 1 receptor gene. And that was very important because there's a lot of ways to strengthen the cannabinoid system in your body. So my cannabinoid system was underactive, and I was having a lot of problems related to that. And so there's things like CBD oil, very low doses of THC, and things like butyrate can help your cannabinoid system. There's actually quite a lot of things that can help with the cannabinoid system. And so we have that on Selfhacked. We have these personalized blog posts on the CNR1 gene on Self-Decode. But yeah, these were contributing to my gut inflammation and lectin sensitivity. That was a big thing for me. Then I found some genes related to the Th1, Th17 pathway that were increasing my inflammation, and that was very interesting. And then, the PON1 was interesting, and just, I basically, like, for me, one of the things I always like to improve is my mood. And so in the mood report, that was very interesting. I saw that there was a lot of serotonin related genes that were problematic. And so I started to take 5-HTP as a result. Yeah. So kind of like a lot of, it's things here and there rather than there was just one big epiphany or something like that. But it's just things that I gain over time. I get this good nugget here. As I read through posts that, again, I'm reading through the posts that are highest risk for me. based on the face that I get. If I get like a red sad face, I'm looking at those posts. I'm not looking at the ones where I get a green face. But yeah, I get these nuggets in the topics that I care about, and it's just over time, just like, oh, that's very interesting. I should either try that, or now I know why that works for me, stuff like that. And then also the lab results were very, very important for me. I cut out saturated fats because my LDL was too high. I normalized my T3, and I did a lot of other things with the lab tests that normalized after uploading them. I saw once you see which ones are suboptimal, my ferritin was suboptimal. There's just a bunch of them that were suboptimal, and then I basically normalized them, and that was a very good improvement. And then there was just things I read on Selfhacked, and it's just all together is all the information. I mean, at the end of the day, it's like my company, it's my baby, but also it's helped me out quite a bit as well.
Yeah, I mean, I concur with you on the cannabinoid. I mean, I cannot believe how much better I feel when I take CBD oil. I definitely know that I'm very, very sensitive to pain, and definitely felt like I needed my cannabinoid receptors, or something just wasn't optimal there. Where with CBD, I feel much better on that. Less aches and pains, and better mood, better sleep, just lots and lots of improvements.
We're
Yes.
coming out with a pain report, by the way,
Oh,
and that
interesting.
should be, yeah. So we got a pain report, thyroid, mood, weight, inflammation, kind of like really you could dig down on each topic that really interests you.
Fantastic. Yeah. And so everyone, if you want to go get your genetics done, finally, don't put it off anymore. Don't, you know that you want to know this information, go to get.selfdecode.com/Wendy and use coupon code Myers Detox. So Joe, thanks for coming on the show. Any parting thoughts or anything that you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, I mean, the audience can also subscribe to our email list. We have very good content there because, we give exclusive content in our email list. You can go to Selfhacked and sign up to any of our bonus products there, or put in your email, and you'll get exclusive content there as well. And yeah, and I think and we basically also show you how to use Self-Decode, how to improve. Whether you're a member or you're not a member, we still give you very interesting content about how to improve your health based on that. We also have one related to respiratory infections, which is relevant, especially nowadays, because COVID really affects the respiratory system. It's really important that I think people really understand their blueprint and understand cutting edge, individualized tips to improve their health.
Yes, absolutely. I 100% agree with you. And so everyone, Joe, thanks so much for coming on the show. I love your work. I highly recommend everyone to go on selfhack.com and sign up. You have exemplary blog posts and content.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So everyone, thanks for tuning in today to the Myers Detox podcast, where we talk about all types of topics related to heavy metal detoxification. You definitely need to know your genes, especially if you're having trouble detoxing. So thanks for tuning in, and you can find me on myersdetox.com. We have hundreds of podcasts, hundreds of free articles. You can dig into all on the topic of detoxification. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll talk to you guys next week.